Well, hello and welcome to Critical Weight Theory, and I'm going to examine the Darlie Routier case. And yes, that is apparently how it is pronounced. So I've got the pronunciation note part of the episode out of the way. So I originally talked about Darlie Routier in like it was like 9 years ago, and I published an article on vocal.com titled Darlie Routier, Innocent or Guilty. And that was written because despite a conviction, there are reasons to believe that she may be innocent. And I wanted to sort of do an update on this particular story. So, first, what are the basics of the case? Well, on February 4th, 1997, so actually quite a while ago now, in Rowlett, Texas, Darlie Routier was sentenced to death by lethal injection for the murder of her 5-year-old son, Damon, while her other son, Devon, was also killed during the same attack. His death never reached a separate trial, and Darlie has always maintained that an unidentified intruder broke into their home, assaulted her, and killed her children. Despite her hospital stay and some serious injuries, testimony from forensic experts ultimately secured her conviction. So it's a crazy story for sure. And when I asked people, to comment on it, like whether or not she was innocent or guilty, the people who claim that she was guilty made no compelling case. In fact, like one of the comments was just the word guilty with an exclamation point. Like that's going to convince me of her innocence. So let this be a message to everybody out there. If you disagree with me that she's likely innocent, I want you to actually provide some evidence, all right? That's like the least you can do. It's literally the least you can do, all right? So, decades later, the guilty verdict remains distinctly questionable. Prosecutors heavily relied on bloodstain evidence to position Darlie as the culprit, but the efficacy of such analysis has faced intense scrutiny. The National Academy of Sciences has even warned against excess faith in blood spatter analysis, attributing it to a media-driven effect where forensic science is falsely perceived as infallible. And even though I love the show Dexter, or at least most of the show Dexter, oddly enough, I think that's actually contributed to some of this belief that something like blood spatter analysis is a truly irrefutable science. And of course, there are other forensic analysis things that you could call into question, like a good old standby is handwriting analysis, for example. If you just think about that in a basic way, like of course people have a different signature here and there. Sometimes you just write your signature in a somewhat different way, and of course the surface that you're writing on can impact how you will write something. And I would assume there are different interpretations of something like blood spatter as well. You know, the idea that forensic science is 100% irrefutable evidence that somebody is guilty or maybe innocent. I think we have to be cautious about that sort of belief. So while skepticism of the state's experts does not automatically overturn a verdict, it introduces significant reasonable doubt, especially when paired with how the original jury was managed. A central piece of the prosecution's strategy relied on shaping how the jury perceived Darlie's grief. The jury was shown a news broadcast of Routier and her family holding a graveyard gathering to posthumously celebrate Devon's 7th birthday, just 8 days after the murders. And the footage showed her smiling and spraying silly string on the graves while singing. And naturally, observers rushed to view this behavior as callous. But here's the thing though, grief is intensely subjective, and the footage was heavily stripped of its context. Crucially, the jury was never shown a different portion of the same video where Darlie was seen weeping and praying over her devastating loss. And this brings to mind personally my grandmother's funeral. After that, I remember hearing about my cousin gossiping about me because I didn't cry at the funeral. So that was regarded as callous. So there's a little bit of a personal connection I make with this story because people view things in a different way, and they grieve in a different way, and some people just aren't very emotional. And when it came to that footage, it removed the context of the fact that there were other children there, and the selective presentation severely biased the public and the jury. So today, true crime analysts and major documentaries, including an extensive ABC 2020 special series, widely cite the silly string tape as a classic example of prejudicial media coverage designed to distort public perception. And the impact was real. One original juror later expressed deep regret over the decision, noting that they were also deprived of seeing the full photographs of Darlie's physical injuries during deliberation. The injuries that she sustained during the alleged attack. Those physical injuries raise severe logistical questions about the state's theory. The prosecution labeled Darlie's wounds as minor and self inflicted, but the medical reality tells a different story. Her neck wound came within a terrifying 2 millimeters of her carotid artery, or carotid artery. I've sometimes mispronounced that word. And outside forensic investigators and journalists, including a deep dive investigation by Texas Monthly, have continuously challenged the state's narrow timeline. The defense argues that it is a physical impossibility for a heavily bleeding woman to viciously assault two children, meticulously stage a crime scene, plant a bloody tube sock 75 yards down an alley, and return to a couch within a span of mere minutes before the paramedics arrived, all without leaving a trace of her own blood along the escape path. So think about that. I mean, you know, that's a bit of a thing to really set up there. And furthermore, the physical evidence includes an unexplained adult bloody fingerprint left on a coffee table at the scene. Prosecutors initially claimed it belonged to one of the children, but subsequent analysis after the children's bodies were exhumed proved otherwise. And decades of further testing have definitively excluded Darlie, her ex husband Darren, their children, and every single first responder or investigator on the scene, leaving an unidentified presence at the heart of the crime scene. So that there were people who were accusing Darren, the ex-husband, of doing the crime, but apparently he has been excluded as a likely suspect as well. And the state's proposed motive has aged just as poorly. The prosecution theorized that financial burdens and a desire to maintain a lavish lifestyle prompted her to murder her children. So, beyond the fact that there is no concrete evidence such a plot was ever devised, I mean, that's kind of a major point right there. The logic is deeply flawed because financial hardship is a common crisis. It describes a good chunk of the population, and destroying one's family offers no guarantee of financial relief. Though Darlie and her husband Darren officially divorced in 2011, Darren has consistently maintained his absolute belief in her innocence, publicly asserting to this day that an intruder committed the crimes. So, you have the ex-husband who is convinced that somebody else was responsible. And again, there's no evidence whatsoever that this was a financial plot. So that is a weakness in the case, if ever there was one. And it is irresponsible to make such a claim without any supporting evidence. So, of course, if anybody does have such evidence, go ahead and let me know. That's your responsibility, it's your burden of proof. And if you truly believe she's guilty, then go ahead and let me see the evidence that there was some sort of financial motive at play here. I've seen zero evidence of that. So Routier remains on death row at the Patrick O'Daniel unit in Gatesville, Texas, suspended in a long-standing legal limbo. Her federal appeals are currently frozen, and no execution date has been set because the legal system is waiting on the results of advanced scientific testing. The Innocence Project officially joined her defense team, securing a comprehensive court order for state of the art DNA testing on an unprecedented scale. So, oddly enough, this is just taking a long, long time, but that's actually pretty common, unfortunately, for a lot of cases. It's much easier to just convict and imprison somebody in a timely manner, but if you want to free them, often it can take like decades. And this comprehensive testing covers a massive amount of evidence that modern technology had never previously analyzed, including the tube sock found down the alleyway, recovered hairs, Routier's nightshirt, the crime scene bedding, and the butcher knife used as the murder weapon. And the definitive results of these highly anticipated tests remain under official review. Decades after the initial trial, the case balances entirely on whether modern science will ultimately validate the original jury's verdict or finally prove the existence of the intruder that Darlie has insisted was there all along. So again, this case isn't so much about what I believe or what you believe. It's about what the evidence says, and that's how these things are supposed to work. And again, I want to emphasize that there's no evidence that there was some sort of attempt to have a lavish lifestyle, by somehow getting a bunch of money out of this. There's no evidence of that at all. And if you have any of that, I'd like to see it. I think you would have to make something up though. But anyway, that's the update to this story. And I guess let me know your thoughts on it. Anyway, have a good day, to the extent possible. All right, bye.